GPU prices are rising to the moon, but why? In this video I try to give an explanation besides AI stuff. I originally thought that GPU prices might be this high because of inflation and other reasons I am going to explain in this video. But in my second script review, I thought I should make a few graphs with raw data I was just going to throw around and give a slight overview. And one graph in particular changed the whole direction I wanted to go in this video. Oh yeah, and I just used Nvidia GPUs for my charts just because they are market leader and AMD just earns the pricing on Nvidia's. Modern GPUs cost nowadays upward of $1,000 at launch. This is ridiculous when you notice that GPU prices were roughly half that a decade ago. The current high-end model of Nvidia, the 4090, has an MSRP of $1,599 and currently goes for over $2,000 over the counter. The reason is the discontinuation and the high demand of this powerhouse of a GPU. This might be the first clue on what's actually going on with pricing. When modern GPUs are so overpriced, why are they still selling for this much and pricing even goes up after 2 years? This seems like the market for high-end GPUs isn't even saturated. But AI and no competition in this space seems like a more reasonable explanation for the high pricing of these high-end GPUs. With the introduction of the 90-tier cards, the perspective of the buyers changed. The 3090 having an MSRP of $1,499 and the 3090 Ti with an MSRP of $2,000 are positioning themselves more in the spot of a Titan card being branded as a consumer card. Titans are known for being expensive but not having much more performance, being notoriously known for the bad price-to-performance ratio. But this isn't the case for the 4090 at least. Anyways, consumers think that the 90 tier is the new 80 tier, but this is wrong. Let's have a look at our first chart, which shows the performance to price, which means bigger number better over the launch date. Performance is the average GPU performance of 3D Mark times by. The price given is the launch price, that's why the Titans are so low at the bottom, and this is not adjusted to inflation. As you can see, the numbers are rising over the year, meaning a better value for a consumer over time even though the pricing of GPUs increased. The red line is the trend of the performance to price before the pandemic, the orange circle is when it happened, and the green line is after the pandemic. The three green dots of the 30 series being so low are the 3090, 3080 Ti and 3090 Ti. The 3080 Ti was just bad value at launch, but both of the other cards are more in line with the Titans, following an expensive path for more performance which isn't really worth it. And the yellow dot next to the 3090 Ti is the 1630. Please never even think of buying this card at MSRP, it is just so bad value. With the next generation, the 40 series, we see the 90 tier card slowly getting closer to the other cards, which means better value for the high-end new Titans. The 80 tier cards, which are, in my opinion, the highest consumer end cards, are more in line with the graph, showing a still steady increase in performance per dollar. When we adjust the 780 to the 30% inflation, we see that this card costs around $844 US. The 3080 costs $145 less and the 4080 $350 more than the 780 at launch. Let's just look at the performance to price for now. These are not adjusted to inflation. As you can see, the line goes up, which means GPUs are getting more expensive but also more powerful than the generation before. This graph also shows very well that the increase is not linear and that you have to pay a premium price to get a premium product, in contrast to the low-end GPUs of a generation. If we look closer at the graph, we can see that there is a bottom line, which dictates the theoretical maximum performance you can get at a given price. This becomes even more obvious when we look at the performance to price of used cards, where the performance matters most. Titans are still not a good value even when used, mostly due to their high prices at launch and users wanting some of their spendings back. But other cards like the 2080 Ti have such bad reputation that no one wants to buy them even though their performance is not bad, leaving the seller no other choice than lower the prices to sell them off even though the card had an MSRP of $1,000 at launch. The 3080 is also quite good. I will probably pick up one for myself too. The 1080 is also a good choice. Older generations are probably not worth it if you're upgrading from your current card. When you want good value, you shouldn't buy high-end GPUs, because they're losing value the fastest. Not only the price of high-end GPUs increased, also the performance relative to the prior generation equivalent. So let's have a look at the performance increase of the 60, 70 and 80 tier cards over the last few generations. And exactly this data showed me that the prices are actually pretty bad. The performance increase from the 900 series to 10 series was huge. That's why it was such a legendary generation. The 1080 was just $50 more expensive than the 980, and you got so much more out of it. And it's better than the Titan Z. That's probably the reason why the 20 series looks so out of place, because the performance is below what's expected after such a good performance increase. But together they average out to around 1.6 times the performance of the prior generation, what is probably Nvidia's goal generation over generation. In the next graph you can see the prices of different tiers over time. This is adjusted to inflation. The pricing stayed mostly consistent in the 80 tier cards except the 4080. We can see a slight rise in the 70 tier cards. The 4070 costs around $599, which is more expensive than the $430 price tag of the 770 adjusted to inflation. The 60 tier cards going up and down in price and are now at a good value again. Funnily enough, the 4090 is cheaper than the 3090 adjusted to inflation, and I think this gives a quite good overview. To conclude this chapter, we can just look at this curve. This one shows the performance increase generation over generation related to the price increase adjusted to inflation. To explain it better, it's basically the first graph I showed in this chapter divided by the price ratio between the generation. So basically how much more value the new generation has compared to the old one. Let's make an example. When a new generation card costs the same as last gen but has 60% more performance, then the value in the diagram is 1.6. If it's double the price, then the value is 0.8. This means that the next gen has worse price performance than the last gen if the value is below 1, which the 80 tier card of current generation is heading to. The line goes down, and this is not good. The reason for the spike at the 20 to 30 series is because the price stayed the same but performance went up. This is not true for the 60 series. It does what it wants and actually tries to be good value, but the trend goes down and we have to see how the 50 series is priced to get a clearer picture of the whole situation. But let's dive into the second last chapter and look why they might be choosing these prices. The GPUs of the GeForce lineup are branded and intended for gaming. That means we have something to compare performance and get a feeling what to expect. A big point we have to talk about is resolution. Regarding to the Steam hardware survey, September 2024, the most common ones are 4K 1440p and 1080p. 1080p has become mainstream since the end of 2000s and is still the most popular resolution used. Probably because you don't really need more pixels. 1080p is sharp enough for everything the average gamer needs. 1440p and 4K are slowly coming, but after that more resolution it's just useless because we can't tell the difference anyway. So the resolution stays mostly the same for the last 15 years. Refresh rate is a much bigger topic now. 60Hz or 80Hz was the norm back in the day, and just lately 120Hz, 144Hz and 165Hz and so on have become more popular. But more than 165Hz is not really needed for the average gamer. It's just smooth enough. The last thing is that games are getting more and more graphically demanding and less optimized. And that's the main reason why we had to upgrade. To run Cyberpunk at max settings with ray tracing so that we don't get distracted from the main storyline just because lighting looks somewhat wrong and the textures are low res. But seriously, this is a driving factor over the last years to upgrade your GPU. And I think more realistic gaming, if it fits, is awesome. Just think about Alan Wake 2, Body Cam, Black Myth Wukong, or Cyberpunk 2077 with visual mods. But because we have this realism now at 4K and 165Hz, and we can run it on our 4090s, we don't really need to upgrade anymore, right? So we set our baseline. GPUs are getting more expensive, inflation has something to do with that, but it's not so strong that it would justify the price. As GPU performance increases, monitor resolution and refresh rate doesn't really change that much anymore. The only thing driving the need for more performance is popular games wanting to be hyper-realistic and therefore being more demanding. But because this is also slowing down, we have reached a level where gaming is very realistic and the hardware is capable of driving the games we want to play. Get a 4060 Ti for 1080p Ultra, a 4070 Ti for 1440p Ultra, and a 4080 Ti for 4K Ultra. In many cases you get 80 plus FPS in visually demanding games without ray tracing. Games like Black Myth Wukong, who were released recently on cinematic settings in 4K, only get around 20 FPS. But accept the water, they look incredible. When a 50 series is another 60% increase in performance, then these are probably still not the last cards you need to buy to get high fidelity gaming at high frame rates. But you notice where I'm going here, and that there is a wall we'll be hitting soon. Nvidia needs another innovation like ray tracing, maybe cores for efficient surface, subsurface and volume scatter. Something to increase demand for performance and to sell new GPUs with this new feature. Better efficiency, or just more people have to learn Blender. Otherwise there is no need to upgrade anytime soon when you bought a current gen card. The only way to get money out of people is to keep last gen prices at what they were and make new generation GPUs more expensive and add more features or VRAM so that there is need to buy a new GPU. The last generation is then going to be the new low end. This is the only way to stay profitable, I can imagine. But what do you think about these situations? Or you have any better explanation? Leave a comment, I'm thrilled to read what you think about this topic. And if you're still going to buy that 5090 anyway. Because the release of the 50 series is in sight, I created my price recommendations on what the next gen should cost in my opinion, to at least be somewhat reasonable. You have to remember that the 5060 has probably similar performance to the 3080, that's why I choose them. But a 5080 should not be $1,200, this would just be a scam. But to answer the questions in the title, are GPUs overpriced? I want to counter with another question. Do you really need that new GPU at this price point? I can play most games at high settings on my 2070 Super, which now costs around $200 used. But when you really just want to game at 1440p, 165Hz and be future-proof, buy that 4090 and remember that you get 10 times the performance you would have gotten 10 years ago at the same price point. And be thankful that you didn't buy the Titan Z.